Hi, good morning, London, and thanks so much for coming to this presentation this morning. Absolutely delighted to see you all. So my name is Abby Reynolds, and my background in UX, I'm more user researcher, I would say, is, I guess like a lot of people, I kind of fell into UX, usability about 10, 12 years ago. I was in e-learning, and then I worked in a usability lab. We suddenly got some money for usability. I worked in kind of e-learning, social inclusion, looking at all of that, and then usability. And then I joined the dark side and went into gambling. So I went from social inclusion into gambling, and that was very interesting. I worked for Paddy Power for a couple of years, great UX team. And then I joined what some might say even darker side, which is consultancy, and now I work with a lot of banks. I guess at least with gambling you knew where your money was going. So it's been an interesting journey, and I've been on the client side and I've also been on the consultancy side, so it's quite interesting. And as a researcher, I guess, I've always been interested in why people do things. And we're all designers, or a lot of designers here, a lot of researchers, kind of a very avid, kind of amateur psychologist as well, always kind of interested in what's behind what people do. And that's what I'm going to talk about today, really, is why. Why, for example, why are some websites or interfaces more pleasing to look at and easier to use just looking at them? What is it behind that? How can we build that? How can we design for that? And why, as humans, do we make some choices that are kind of less than optimal? There's principles behind that. And how can, words or positioning subconsciously alter the choices we make back and forth? Is also really interesting when we're obviously putting together websites or interfaces. And I kind of put that one, why is Donald Trump president of America? I don't know, and this one that does keep me up at night, but I won't be talking about that today. I've just kind of moved on. And why do we do that? Because, as somebody said very recently in a nice song, because we're human, after all. And it is because we are human, and as humans, we have the way we perceive the world in a very particular way. We've evolved to kind of see and absorb and interpret information in a particular way. And this way, because we receive so much information, how do we deal with that? We have lots of kind of inbuilt biases, a lot of heuristic shortcuts to be able to filter and sort that information in order to make decisions faster. Otherwise, we'd just be overloaded. And that's what I'm going to talk a lot about today, is understanding those kind of biases and heuristics and how we can apply that to good designs. I'm going to bring up a couple of examples of what I've seen. It's all my own opinion, hands up. And by the way, if you work for Ryanair, I'll apologise in advance for some of the examples I'm going to bring up. And also, we don't make rational, logical decisions. We think we do, but in fact, a lot of it's based on kind of gut instinct, and immediate reactions. And an understanding of these biases can really help us understand and design for those biases. When you're sitting there looking at a blank page, or you're thinking, I need to put this together, or a menu, or these boxes, having kind of a sound understanding of principles will help you make your website more intuitive. I mean, we use that word a lot in user experience. And what does it mean? Well, if you just look at it there, it's based on how, without even conscious reasoning, that you can intuitively understand it, that it's good, that you like it, that it feels good, that emotionally it connects, feeling. That's what we're all kind of striving for. So how do we do that? And that's what I've been interested in. I'm going to speak a little bit about today. And I'm not sure why it's going back and forward. Is it because I'm moving? I'll just stand still. So design principles. This is from interactiondesign.org. They're great. I don't know if anybody knows them, but I do a lot of their online courses, actually. You don't pay too much, and they're really good courses. But they're set of kind of laws or guidelines, human biases, and design considerations. A lot of these you will know instinctively already, but it's good to know kind of the principles and the design behind them. So when you're thinking about how you put stuff together, you can think, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense because it's like that. Now there's a huge amount of them, and there's kind of they're intersections of psychology, sociology, behavioral economics, but I'm going to just talk about a couple and some of the examples that I've seen where they've been used well and maybe not so well. So what I'm going to talk about is how we perceive things. Gestalt, is people familiar with the perceptual? Yes. Okay, thank you. Right, there'll be a questionnaire afterwards to check your understanding. Will be okay. Yeah. How we make choices. We make choices all the time. And understanding, obviously, we want to help our customers make choices. We want them to make the choices we want them to make. So an understanding of how they do it is helpful when we're designing. Choice, look at comparison and anchoring and framing. So it's kind of hard to think about perception or to think about intuitive or shortcuts without talking about Daniel Kahneman. I don't know if people are familiar with him, but his book, Thinking Fast and Slow, you're coming out to sort that, thanks. He won a Nobel Prize in behavioral economics, I think, but it's about, So it's quite a hard read, actually, but well worth a read, and it talks about basically, it talks about how we have two systems for processing information. We have one system which is it's part of how we process information, that kind of pre-cognitive processing for any cognitive scientists in the room. It talks about this visual perception and how we've got two systems let's go back there a little bit. Two systems when we process information, a system 1 and a system 2, which I'll speak about in a moment, and how a lot of kind of that fast, intuitive thinking we make, that immediate reaction, the intuitiveness of a website is based on system 1, and how we can design for system 1 is going to talk about now. So visual perception, they say the eyes are the window to the soul. It's the way how we interpret, how we make meaning out of life. We're presented with a lot of information and stimulus. Vision, for those who have vision, obviously, is one of those most important resources. It takes up to 30% of the information that we get in, and it uses up 30% of our brain energy, which is quite interesting. And we know that we get a ton of information. I don't know what the statistic is, but it's a hell of a lot of information every day. But according to this chap who did a lot of research in it in the 90s, Gregory, up to 90% of that is just lost. We don't see it. And that's kind of the process of perception, which is very interesting. And our job as UX'ers, designers, etc., is to try and get people to pay attention to what we want them to pay attention to. I mean, everybody's familiar with this, I'm sure. Norman Nielsen, eye tracking. Really interesting. You can see here, adverts, etc. The side, we say that all the time. Do a lot of expert evaluations, things like that. Anything on the right-hand side, we kind of know those patterns already, that people automatically ignore that because they see it as advertising, for example. So perception, just to get the kind of formal, technical definition out there, it's that organization, interpretation of the sensory information to give it meaning. So we don't, that expression is so true, we don't see with our eyes, we see with our brain, really. And this is what we want to understand a little bit. How do people actually see? So it's not what you see, it's what you focus on, really. And it's based on past experiences, your own experience, information, and then these shortcuts, biases, and predispositions. And I guess the good news is that as humans, we share a lot of those shortcuts and predispositions. So knowing about them is a good thing, because we can then design for them, we can talk to them. So back to those two systems. System 1, this is what we see, I think, in the first 250 milliseconds. You kind of, when you're presented with information, it is, go back again, sorry, too fast. So you gather, structure, pattern match. This is what we do automatically when we're scanning the room right now, having a look at it. System 2 is more about rational, and system 1 is much faster, intuitive, involuntary. This chap, and system 2. So we like to think that we're more system 2 in terms of our rational, logical, etc. But we're much more system 1, which is kind of the involuntary, automatic, you kind of almost can't help yourself paying attention to this type of thing. And it's how we kind of make sense of the world. It's how we look at a website initially. We kind of parse it. We decide, is it difficult, is it easy? Is it pleasing, is it not pleasing? And this is what I want to talk about in terms of designing for System 1. And Gestalt. So, people familiar with Gestalt? Sorry, I asked already. No. So, it comes out of kind of experimental therapy from Germany about 100 years ago. And 3 Germans came up with the Gestalt laws of perceptual organization. Basically, is how we humans see in patterns, group information and organize information, and how we use shortcuts to make sense of it. Now, obviously, this is important to all of us here in this room, because knowing how that is done, we need to try and represent it on the interface or the app or whatever we're designing. And we want to think about this system really appeals to, or this type of perception really appeals to System 1, that kind of quick, fast, intuitive understanding. And often it's kind of misquoted that the whole is greater than the sum, but it's actually the whole is the other part. So you put everything together, it means something slightly different, is what they said. And there's lots of different rules. I'm not going into all of them. You're probably familiar with some of them. I'll go through a couple of them and a couple of examples I've seen. I'm sure you'll be familiar with them. And now you'll know the name of what they are. The similarities. The first one is the law of similarity. So basically, things that look similar, size, colour, shape, will be associated together. We kind of know that. So if you want to group things together, you put them together and you make them look like each other. Obvious, but true. So for example, we see here House of Fraser, just happened to be on that the other week and thought it was good. We can see these 3 buttons. They look the same. They're the same kind of size, shape, etc. So we immediately associate them together. So, okay, we know that works well. But dissimilarity can be really interesting as well to make something stand out. This is John Lewis. This just happened to be the way it is. I think, and this is all again opinion, kind of the Waitrose here is quite good because it's, to me, bang the centre stands out. But that's dissimilarity. That's how we kind of automatically pick up on something different. Because we need to pick up on something different because it might be threatening. So it catches our eye very quickly. Then we have the law of proximity. So this kind of overrides similarity. So, okay, they're not similar to similar, but they're together. So obviously they belong together. And this is all about relationship of data, the way we see in patterns. So that works quite well. Going back to this, so we see these 3 here, these 3 buttons down here, similar. We could almost say this is similar as well in terms of shape, but because they're not together, it's different. I mean, personally, and it's all again opinion, so it'd be good for people to come back to me. In terms of usability, I might have changed that slightly different. It might visually look okay, but I might have changed, if it's a different functionality, I probably would have changed it as well to make it different again. But that again is open to discussion in terms of usability. Forms, we see this a lot in forms. So you see a form, you want somebody to complete a form. There's a lot on UX out there. Luke W, etc. does a lot on forms about how to get people to complete. Something really simple. We see this a lot on iOS. Is just, associating information together like that works really well, and it makes it much easier for people to actually see it. So a good example of that. Ryanair, I fly a lot with them. You'll see that come between Edinburgh and Dublin. They're quite good. They've broken it all up, so it kind of works quite well there. Here's one that maybe not so well. They put these 2 together. And, so I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's funny, it's space, but it's just bad design, I think. And so apologies if anybody's Ryanair here, but so forms are a big area for making people feel comfortable, intuitive, that you can actually complete it very easily. Not so good. And it's still like that, by the way. So the law of continuation. This is an interesting one. This is how we see with our eyes. Again, as designers, we probably do this automatically, but kind of curved or crossed, we follow lines more than anything. It overrides, again, the law of similarity. So, they might be similar, but you'd rather, or they're dissimilar, but you can see that if they're continuing in a line, you want to follow it with your eye. Our eyes like to follow lines. So good example, flew down here with British Airways. I do like British Airways. I don't know, has anybody seen their new app or their new feature? What was it called? My Timeline? It's kind of cool. They're doing it in beta, so I signed up to it. But basically, it's a timeline, so you go from here, and that's the mobile, and you go up again to here. So it's these three here, but they actually use a line. Now, we scroll down anyway, but you'll have seen testing yourself. Some people scroll, some people don't. Depends how much. But by the use of this line here, like they've just simply kind of applied the law exactly as it is, it brought me all the way down. And it was really useful information anyway. I thought it was a good example of alignment and using kind of a line to get people's eyes to make sure that they go all the way down to the bottom. Not a good example, guess who I'm going to talk about? So Ryanair, back to Ryanair. I don't know whether this is to do with the way they pull information or not, but can you spot what's wrong with this? So the first trip is there. And how do people read? The other way around, yeah. I don't know whether it's, but I automatically clicked on this one and then got a different flight time and assumed my flight had been cancelled. I mean, it's not a difficult assumption, is it really, that your flight has been cancelled by Ryanair because the timing was wrong, but it was just the wrong date. So I really don't know what was going on there, but a big difference. This is like between British Airways and Ryanair, and that's desktop, obviously. But in terms of working with understanding how people engage with information, not so good. So I think structure, I think Gestalt is really interesting. We'll talk about graphic design a little bit, but it's really interesting how you put information together, the relationship visually between information and the association between information and how you get people to engage with that information. If you look at something like Netflix, they do a lot of A/B testing, I believe, and a lot of stuff with, you're talking about emotional kind of testing. They do a lot of eye tracking because they really want to see how people engage with content. But if you just break it down, it's kind of really interesting because it uses all those laws. For example, similarity, they're together, same size. Proximity, beside each other. Alignment, they go that way. And even in terms of priority, this is obviously something that they're pushing. So, simple stuff, but it's using all those kind of common sense principles behind it. And I think it's quite a good site, and it is quite engaging. Apart from even the visual design, you could see what's going on there. Now, very often we see Gestalt used in kind of logos, and I just briefly mentioned that. I'm sure people have seen this guy here, the closure. This is just white space and black, but we automatically fill in the dots, closure. And it makes stuff more engaging and more intuitive, and used a lot in kind of graphics. This one is quite interesting. This is multi-stability. So it's got an ambiguous figure. It's two things going on here. I don't know if people see them. Can you see two stories? What's the first story? Harry Potter. A second story? Horse, yeah, Helena Troy, yeah. So it's kind of interesting, you kind of go between the two. And that type of thing, Gestalt is used very often in graphic design because it makes our brain work a little bit more, and we like it. It's interesting. I don't know if you've seen this one, and apologies, to WWF, they're a great organisation, but then you can kind of make a play on that again. Have you ever seen that guy? Which is kind of bad, but I thought it funny, I just saw him coming up. Now, very quickly, because I'm running out of time, apologies, choice is very important as well when we're talking about heuristics, shortcuts, etc. Life is the sum of all our choices. And I guess choice is very important in our designs as well, whether we want our customers to choose our homepage, to choose. Customer journeys are all a series of choices, so we need to kind of be informed about, thinking about the customer and how they're going to make those choices. So quickly look at comparison, hankering. So how many options or categories should you have in a navigation bar, for example, do you reckon? 5 to 8, that's good. Yeah, anybody else? No, I think that's a good idea. The answer is, of course, it depends. But 5 to 8, I've heard that, and I was going to use that. It really depends on, content. Like if you look at this website, in terms of, navigation, etc., Yeah, did you say 5 to 8, was it? Yeah. I think that's pretty good because it's 4. It's fairly clear, isn't it? And I've heard that 5 to 8 bandied about a lot. And, you know, fits in nicely. Any more, it kind of gets a bit difficult. But the big thing about navigation is it's choice as well. You know, it's giving your users choice. This one, for example, what do you think of this one? Yeah, it's when you've probably all heard about the jam jar experiment. You know, when Evenyar, she went in the supermarket and she offered a taste of 10 types of jam, and people didn't really buy any, and then she went in and offered them 3 or 4, I can't remember the exact, and the sales conversion was much higher. So don't overwhelm with choice, and because indecision is no, then people will make no choices at all. And mega menus, sometimes people go crazy with mega menus. Obviously a lot of content to put in here, but I think it could have been done better. And yeah, start with content will be the answer there. And comparison. So this is really interesting. I did some work with Vodafone. This is from Vodafone, not specifically on this, but in terms of giving product choice, this worked really well. We understand that people don't make optimal choices. They satisfies in terms of, you know, if you really, really want to spend a lot of time making an optimal choice, it would take you a lot of time, but people are quite interested in making sure they get a good enough deal. So when we present information like this, that's kind of easy to compare. And again, you know this all intuitively, but if it's got like less information is more, we've found. Even for people who want more information, they want to start off with this. And this type of thing really helps people. This benefit-led type comparison, you see it with tick boxes as well, really helps people make decisions quickly. And that's what we want to do, want to support our customers to do. And they went even further and they kind of compared it to they thought, okay, the next step this person on our website will be doing, will be looking at competitors. And they went, okay, we'll do that as well, which I thought was a good example. So anchoring is very important. It's a reference point, and it's another form of cognitive bias. For example, you're buying that 30 grand car, and then somebody says, well, what about this 1 grand type of navigation that's super duper? You've already bought the 30 grand car, so you're like, what's 1 grand extra in the whole grand scheme of things? Now, if they started off with the 1,000, you would have went, no. So very important to kind of have a point of reference to give people an idea to help inform that choice. You see that very often, in terms of, not very stable. Okay, it's my time here. See that very often okay, that doesn't like that slide. Let's go on to framing. Just we're talking about research this very last 2 minutes. This is a really interesting study from Nielsen. He said, in how you present your recommendations of research. So should a search function be redesigned based on usability testing? So 4 out of 20 users did not find it, so it's kind of loss, negative. Yes, we should redesign. 16 out of 20 positive. No, it's fine. So it's a really interesting cognitive bias framing, and as researchers we have to be really careful of it, because you might subconsciously do it, not even do it on purpose, that you want something, and so you frame it in a particular way that you want to get a result of. That's Norman Nielsen, it's quite a recent one, so you can find that online. So questions as well, like how easy did you find the website to use? How satisfied? These are all kind of framing, you're looking for something. Well, what you should be saying, obviously, is how easy or difficult. How satisfied or dissatisfied were you? How likely? And yeah, how amazing this presentation stays the same, obviously. And then finally, a really interesting one I've seen recently, I'll finish on this then, is that in framing as well, people want a positive outcome, but they want to avoid a loss as well. I was paying a toll in Ireland last week on my car, and I came across the screen and I saw something like this. I was doing it with my father, it was all good, make payment. And then I went into this. Continue paying as unread. Where you can kind of get without the flashy effects, you kind of get that. But what it's trying to do is, you're going to make a loss. You're going to make a loss, go with the other one. And I've seen that quite a lot in design. I don't know what people think about it. It can be, it can be quite usability issue. My father wasn't sure. Didn't know what was going on because it kind of flipped on the other side. Is it a dark pattern? I don't know, but we see it quite a lot, which is interesting. So just be a little bit careful of that one. And I'm probably going to have to finish now, am I? Because my laptop's let me down. Yeah, okay. Let me just see what I was finishing on. Yeah, so with choices, I guess. Oh, there we go. It's just to summarize a little bit about the content, not to overwhelm. Think about your customers when they're comparing choices. Anchors can be really useful, and the order of anchoring is important, starting with high to low, and how you frame questions is important. And finally, I guess the last slide then is just to say, I don't know if anybody's seen Black Mirror. Fantastic. It's about how we engage with technology in the future. And not to give too much away, but he's not really human. But and there's been a lot of talk about technology, future technology, chatbots, but we still need to think about humans and how we react with humans in terms of all these new and exciting technologies, and having a good understanding of how we operate helps us to become, make better designs and more engaging user interfaces. And yeah, I guess that's it. Thank you very much. My last slide was just, it is working. You're holding it there, yeah. I'm on Twitter. Please come say hello. All my ravings are on my own kind of blog site. I talk about psychology a bit, about motion and design and things like that. And I'm up in Edinburgh if anybody's there and fancies calling in. Say hello, please do. And thank you. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you very much.